Consumer staples were in the red, and leaders to the upside in the Dow, Intel and Salesforce, while Apple and J&J led to the downside. After earnings, Akamai fell 8.3%, MGM dropped 6%, while Lyft rose 34%. In other news, Supermicro surged another 10% and is closing in on $900 a share. And wrapping things up, some of the names pointing after the bell tonight include Cisco, Twilio, and Occidental. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney. We got you covered on those earnings. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type SQUAWK, S-Q-U-A, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Just to update you on a continuing developing story, multiple people were struck by gunshots at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade. The Kansas City Police Department saying this in a post on X. The Associated Press reporting this happening minutes after Kansas City Chiefs players vowed to go for a third straight Super Bowl title. Earlier today, shots were fired. Multiple people near the parade route were carried away on stretchers. 2 armed people are in custody, according to the Kansas City Police. The shooting happened near Union Station in the city. The police, though, are still trying to determine the number of victims, although AP saying 8 to 10 people injured after that shooting near that parade. So we'll continue to monitor and bring you more headlines as they are known. This is Bloomberg.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
on Bloomberg Radio.
It is about that time. We got about, 17 minutes to the close right now. And it's time for Drive to the Close with Aaron Kennan, co-founder and chief executive officer at Clear Harbor Asset Management. The firm manages over $1.5 billion. Aaron joining us from Stamford, Connecticut. Aaron, good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. How are you doing, Tim?
Yeah, we're doing pretty well, thanks. Trying to figure out yesterday's sell-off in the context of today's gains. How are you thinking about the hotter-than-expected CPI print that we got yesterday, and whether or not what all the fuss was about?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It all really started with the jobs report of a week ago, and the January data was stronger than anticipated, and I think market sentiment started shifting, where we went from sort of 6 to 7 rate cuts anticipated by the market through Fed funds futures contracts to now it looks like closer to the Fed's summary of economic projections, otherwise known as their dot plot, which is 3 rate cuts for this year. And, I think the CPI just sort of fed into that narrative. What I will say, though, is that, as we all know, that the CPI number yesterday was quite noisy because some of the owner equivalent rent data is sort of backward looking and is more of a survey rather than a reality. Mm-hmm. And so it really, OER is more about, if you were to rent your home, what would it rent out for, rather than an actual increased CPI number on housing itself, which wasn't too bad. So CPI, if you strip all that out, was running about 2%, and that's pretty much in line with the Fed's PCE indicator that they like to look at.
Having said that, Aaron, markets, we're seeing some buying into the close here. We're pretty much at our best levels of the session, so now up about 1% on the NASDAQ, up about 0.8% on the S&P. Interesting talking with our Ira Jersey earlier, and said kind of the trifecta, the things that move the Treasury market is non-farm payrolls, it's CPI, it's also retail sales data, and we'll get that read. If we get jobs came in hot, CPI, as you said, maybe a little noisy in terms of the CPI print, but it did come in higher than expected overall. If we get a hot retail sales number, I don't know. Do you start to rethink a little bit about what the Fed is going to have to do? And could we get a Fed that potentially even has to raise rates again?
Yeah, it's always a possibility, Carol, but I think at the end of the day, we're seeing, we came from 9.1% headline inflation in June of 2022 to now, somewhere around 3% on a year-over-year basis, and closer to 2% on a 3 to 6 month sort of rolling basis, depending on which metric you look at. I think the Fed is essentially seeing what they want to see. You saw Austin Goolsbee, one of the voting members on the FOMC this morning, essentially saying we don't need to see 2% inflation on an annualized basis to start cutting rates. And so I think the risk is still towards cutting rather than the possibility of a surprise to the market, which is that rates move higher.
Okay, Aaron, I want to dig deeper into the equity side of this and talk a little bit about what we've seen in the S&P 500, the market cap weighted S&P 500 so far this year versus what we've seen in the equal weighted S&P 500 so far this year. There's a dispersion. Once again, the market cap weighted one is outperforming the equal weighted index. What story does that tell about how the year is going to shake out?
Well, it's interesting, Tim, because this was a dynamic that we saw throughout the entirety of 2023 for the most part, where you had the S&P market cap weighted index, which is the S&P index that everyone talks about, driven by the Magnificent Seven. And, most of those 7 stocks are pushing it higher again this year, led by NVIDIA again, up almost 50%. In fact, if you look at the S&P last year, the 7 stocks that I just referenced were up about 110%. The rest of the market was only up about 12.5%. And that's sort of the thematic that's playing out this year with a little bit of a caveat around some strength in the healthcare segment of the market. And so, I think it's an important reminder that the vast majority of stocks really over the last, 2 years, if you look back to December of 2021 to today, you have the S&P up about 7% over that long 2+ year period. You have the Russell 2000 down about 10%. You have the emerging markets index down 13%. And you have 84% of the S&P 500 constituents that are actually not back towards the 2021 peaks. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing. That actually means, I think if you look at the glass half full, it means that there are lots of opportunities in the marketplace for stocks that haven't really been on this ride higher over the last year or so.
So where would you put client money, new client money right now?
Well, we start with, how do we create asset allocations for our clients? What makes good sense? But within the equity markets, because I think that was the question you were asking, we've seen opportunities, across, many different segments of the economy. There's been this sort of rolling recession happening. And just over the last couple of years, you look at, COVID in the healthcare segment. You had something like syringe use, for example, skyrocket because everyone was receiving their shot. And then you had it fall off a cliff. And now you have the Ozempics, the GLP-1 drug impacting that demand. So, it's those things that we're looking for, which is this sense that, there are lots of opportunities even in segments of the economy that are viewed as more defensive. We see opportunities in the utility sector, in natural gas distribution companies, and water utilities. Even within technology, we see, wonderful opportunities there. Back over in healthcare, you look at sort of the robotic surgical space. The idea that a doctor in Los Angeles can do work and open heart surgery work on someone sitting in New York City or lying on a bed in New York City. I mean, this is going to become much more commonplace. But with that, we're also staying away from certain areas of the economy at certain moments in time. If you look at elective surgeries having surged post-COVID, well, what does that mean from a headwind perspective? That means healthcare insurance companies have a lot of bills to pay. And so, we're trying to look at both sides of the docket there. The industrial spending that's coming out of the government. Right. We've seen those dollars surging coming out of COVID and still, at $6.4 trillion a year. Lots of opportunities on the water infrastructure front there as well.
Definitely provides momentum. So good to check in with you. As always, Aaron Kennan, co-founder, CEO at Clear Harbor Asset Management, joining us from Connecticut. We've just got the bell away. About 10 minutes.
your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We are minutes away from the latest quarterly numbers out of Cisco Systems. Its report will give investors a sense of how the company's coping with a sales slowdown and whether it is making cutbacks to stay lean. CEO Chuck Robbins is trying to lessen his company's dependence on one-time purchases of network machinery by pivoting into services and software. Again, coming up after the close of trading, Cisco Systems, that stock up now ahead of its report by 1.1%. Lyft shares are surging. We've got Lyft higher now by 35% after last night's earnings report. However, if you tuned in last night, right after we got the numbers, you would have heard of us telling you that the stock was up as much as 67% after earnings. Lyft today issued a massive correction to its outlook for earnings margins in 2029, an issue that was addressed on the conference call. Dan Ives is a senior tech analyst with Wedbush Securities. He says that error was absolutely unacceptable.
This was an episode out of Saturday Night Live, except it was real. And I think that the scary thing here is just that it actually got through. And I think it's been really a comedy show that we've seen at Lyft for years right now. And this is, even though it was a good quarter, it overshadowed by another black eye moment for Lyft.
And right now we've got Lyft up by 35.1%. Uber, meanwhile, is buying back as much as $7 billion in shares to return capital to shareholders after reporting its first full year of operating profit and consistent positive free cash flow in 2023. Uber shares, they are surging as well today. Right now, Uber up by 14%. Those are our top company stories at this hour. I'm Charlie Pellet, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, just about 5 minutes away from the closing bell. We're going to head over to our TV colleagues in just a moment and count you down to the close and also earnings. But we also want to keep you updated on a developing story. We are reporting multiple people were struck by gunshots at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade. This is from the Kansas City Police Department. They put a post out on X, of course, formerly known as Twitter. The AP, Associated Press, reporting that minutes after Kansas City Chiefs players vowed to go for another title, Super Bowl title, earlier today, shots were fired and multiple people near the parade route were carried away on stretchers. Our reporting, 2 armed people are in custody, according to the Kansas City Police Department. The shooting did happen near Union Station in the city, and the police are still trying to determine the number of victims. Going through various news reports, AP talking about 8 to 10 people. They are sourcing the fire department battalion chief Michael Hopkins as saying that 8 to 10 people were injured, but declined further comments, saying only that additional information will be released soon. But again, police in a news release that 2 people were detained. Fans were urged to exit the area as quickly as possible, as you would be expecting them to do.
Yeah, we're going to continue to bring you updated coverage throughout the next hour and the next few minutes when we do get that information. In other news, Carol, we are still in the heart of earnings season right now, and we got a handful of companies reporting after the bell today. We got Cisco at 4:05, which is one of the companies that we're going to be keeping a close eye on.
Yeah, and it's a company that, Chuck Robbins, the company's CEO, has certainly been looking to shift some of the focus at that company and, if you will, kind of deal with a sales slowdown. It's also going to be, making cutbacks, we know, to stay lean and mean, but we feel like we've seen that from a lot of technology companies in terms of cutting back on workers. So we're going to be watching, certainly, to see what they have to say. They've been so dependent on one-time purchases of networking machinery, right? So that's one big purchase, one big cost, if you will, but they're like a lot of other tech companies pivoting into service and software where you have recurring revenues, where you have subscription, or, if you will, kind of costs. So we'll be watching for that.
Okay, some other names: TripAdvisor, Twilio, and Oxy also reporting after the bell. Still earnings season. It's always earnings season.
And we're seeing buying into the close here. We're near our highs of the session. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're headed over to our TV colleagues beyond the bell. It is starting right now.
the bell. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic alongside Alex Steele. We're counting you down to the closing bell. And here to take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast. We're joined by Scarlett Fu here in Studio 2. Our radio colleagues Tim Stenovic and Carol Masser starting their workday. And we welcome our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms. And that includes our partnership with YouTube, as well as those folks on Bloomberg Originals. Happy Valentine's Day, Tim and Carol.
Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Yeah, and it looks like some cheer, maybe some of that love being spread around Wall Street. Here you are looking at what, just a couple minutes to go. We've seen some buying into the close here. Russell 2000, guys, I know we like to talk about it. 2.5% higher here, or just below that. So it too is picking up momentum as we get near the closing bell.
Okay, we're not quite making up for yesterday's sell-off, but there certainly seems to be a shift in mood, which I find interesting given that we didn't get any new data. Nothing changed from yesterday. We did talk to Ira Jersey a little earlier, and he said keep a close eye on retail sales tomorrow, because if that comes in hotter than expected, then watch what people are saying about, okay, what the Fed's going to do when it cuts.
The trifecta he talked about.
Yeah, I mean, look, it started with the jobs report last week. CPI yesterday. What happens with retail sales tomorrow?
Absolutely. There's a PPI, of course, following the retail sales, but the retail sales report will kind of herald the start of earnings season for the retailers. Worth noting that volume today is much, much lower, given that it is a little bit of a recovery from yesterday's sell-off.
Dead cat bounce? Am I saying it? What are we feeling?
I thought we weren't saying
Abigail Doolittle quoted you in our 2 o'clock hour and said, yep, something that she said Alex still likes to say, dead cat bounce, which she doesn't love because she has cats.
All right, as we get to the closing bells here, we should point out the S&P 500 in the spotlight right now, surging back above that 5,000 level ever so briefly here. It takes a while for these numbers to settle, but it looks like we're going to close right around that big round number that, of course, we made a big hullabaloo about just a few days ago. Up about 47 points or a percent on the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average also rallying 151 points or 0.4%. The NASDAQ Composite getting in on the action with the 200-point jump or about 1.3%. But the Russell 2000 once again reasserting itself here as we start to see more of a rotation into some of those mid and small cap names. A 2.4% gain on the Russell 2000, 49 points, 40, let me try it one more time, 48 points higher than where it was yesterday.
Yeah, it's a lot of chocolate, I guess, and roses this morning, right? You're a little distracted or something?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not like 500 basis points subtracted. But,
My bad.
Hey,
my
everybody makes mistakes, right?
You know, Romaine does get festive. He's wearing a red tie. He's got a red pin, so it happens. Let's take a look at what's happening when you look at the sector breakdown. Lots of green, obviously, across the screen, across our IMAP. And if we take a look at industrials, we're pushing it higher.
Just going to interrupt you for 1 second. We are getting some breaking news. This out of Fed Reserve Vice Chair Michael Barr speaking, basically saying that the Fed needs to see a little bit more data before it actually cuts rates. He says he fully supports a careful approach to policy normalization and says that the CPI data yesterday, guys, showed that the path to 2% is going to be bumpy.
And that really echoes what we heard from Goolsbee earlier, that yes, it could be bumpy, but that's actually okay. I think Waller speaks tomorrow, and that will be quite indicative because many market participants are looking towards him to be kind of that mouthpiece for the Fed, Carol.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right. And this is kind of the stuff that we're going to move from Fed speaker to Fed speaker, from data point to data point. But it is interesting, saying he supports the careful approach to rate cuts that Fed Chair Jay Powell is doing at this point.
Yeah, I guess the bumpy part is interesting, especially given what we heard earlier from Goolsbee, like you mentioned, Alex. And the fact is things were looking really good over the past few months, looking really good since late October, early November. And yeah, there could be some hiccups on the way, but at the same time, we are seeing those rate cut projections kind of match what the summary of economic projections said back in December. So investors are sort of thinking, okay, we're kind of agreeing with what the Fed's going to do.
Yes, finally, right? So maybe the market is going to the Fed versus the Fed going to the market, which is what the setup is, what we kind of felt over the last year, for example. And also it means that maybe if you get a hotter retail sales scar and you get a hotter PPI, maybe that's okay. Like the Fed, we can still pencil in those 3 cuts for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Fed has been steadfast in anticipating 3 rate cuts this year. Traders are now finally pricing in 3 rate cuts, finally catching up with the Federal Reserve, although they still see 70% odds of that 4th rate cut. They can't give that up quite yet.
Yeah, we were speaking with Michael Ferroli over at JP Morgan Securities, and he really talked about this idea that really that next summary of economic projections, that next dot plot, I think, well, we get that at the March meeting, is maybe potentially going to give us a little more clarity.
If anything, the last couple of years have taught us, and this plays into something Michael Barr says. He says, given the limited historical experience with the growth and inflation dynamics we currently face and no modern experience of emerging from a global pandemic, we have yet another reason to proceed carefully as we have been doing. And like, that's fair, right? We still are just kind of wondering how ultimately it all lands after the pandemic. Here we are, what, 4 years out?
Okay, but at the same time, we are still getting company results, and for the most part, results have been pretty good, Scarlett. We're hearing from company after company that's saying, okay, well, look, not everything has worked out, but we're starting to see companies report results that have been exceeding expectations and saying that the economy, some layoffs notwithstanding, the economy looks pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. You said layoffs, and so much of that is driven by cost cutting. We saw that with the big tech companies, of course, last year, and that continues to roll over into 2024.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get back to that. We should point out we are waiting quite a few earnings, including from Cisco tonight. I do want to go back, guys, to the moves that we saw in the broader market today. Seen a lot of superlatives come across the wire here, including NVIDIA rising on the day to overtake Alphabet in market value. We're getting some earnings crossing the wire from TripAdvisor, guys, and some news right now crossing the wire on Tesla and Elon Musk. Who wants to take it?
Where do we want to start, guys? Let's do TripAdvisor. Fourth quarter revenue, folks. It's a beat, $390 million versus the estimate of $373 million. Let's go to fourth quarter adjusted EPS. That is a big beat at first blush. 17 cents better, 38 cents versus the 21-cent estimate on the street. Fourth quarter adjusted EBITDA of $84 million. The street estimate was $62.8 million. Remember, this stock rallied big time, 19% yesterday. They announced the formation of a special committee to evaluate any proposals that may be brought forward for a potential deal. Some of that is in place. So that we're going to look for in terms of commentary. But TripAdvisor right now, guys, up about 5.6%.
Yeah, worth repeating these numbers. Fourth quarter revenue coming in above estimates, $390 million versus estimates of $373 million. Fourth quarter adjusted EPS above estimates at 38 cents. And fourth quarter adjusted EBITDA coming in above estimates at $84 million, Alex.
Cisco crossing the wire right now. The company, here are the big headlines, the big red headlines. The company going to cut about 5% of its global workforce and saying that for the full year, it expects to see revenue in a range of 51.5 to 52.5 billion. That's below the previous range that it had given to investors of 53, we'll call it 54 to 55 billion, and below the average of street estimates, which was for 54. And now just to recap, the fiscal second quarter earnings, which it is reporting right now, we did see a beat on adjusted EPS, and we did see a modest beat here a big miss on revenue. So 12.1 to 12.3 billion here. That's for the fiscal third quarter. The second quarter number coming in at 12.8 billion. So put the net effect of it all together here. You have second quarter numbers that looked like a beat, third quarter forecast that looked like a miss, and a full year forecast that is well below what the street is looking for.
Yeah, that's not great. They did raise their quarterly dividend though, so there is that. But they cutting thousands of jobs after that slowdown. You got corporate technology spending has really hurt its sales growth, and we're just really seeing that play out right now for Cisco.
And the cost of all this is there's going to be a one-time pre-tax charge of about $800 million that investors will need to contend with. One thing that's been pointed out in the analyst notes before Cisco's results was that there was a backlog level that was really depleted. So the weakness from the networking division is going to drive down growth, and the backlog is certainly not going to help because there's no cushion there.
The company's CFO, Scott Herron, pointing out that execution and operating discipline driving top and bottom line results, and the company is focused on financial discipline, operating leverage, and shareholder returns.
What's interesting is this is a company that is trying to shift from selling you one big product to recurring. And so the CFO is saying we're making good progress in that business model shift to more recurring revenue while remaining focused, as Tim said, on that financial discipline.
Hey, I want to get over to shares of Twilio, dropping 8% after the results and forecast. Fourth quarter adjusted EPS did beat estimates, though they're seeing first quarter adjusted EPS coming in 56 to 60 cents per share, beating estimates as well of 55 cents. Twilio seeing first quarter organic revenue up 5% to 6%, and first quarter revenue coming in $1.03 billion to $1.04 billion.
Tesla shares on the move here, and after hours trading up about 2% here. We're now learning that Elon Musk, according to a regulatory filing, now has a 20.5% stake in Tesla. That's significant because the last regulatory filing, which we should point out was almost a year ago, he only disclosed a stake of about 13% of the shares outstanding here. So according to these filings and according to the data on Bloomberg, he now owns about 715 million Tesla shares, up from about 411 million back in March of 2023.
All right, and seeing shares of Tesla move on this news. That stock is up about 2% here in the aftermarket. All right, guys, that is a wrap. Our cross-platform, some earnings and also some news on Elon Musk and his ownership of Tesla. As we said, that stock moving higher here after hours. That's a wrap. Our cross-platform, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals, Beyond the Bell. We'll see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. That's Carol Masser. I'm Tim Stenivek. Let's talk about Cisco because shares are falling in the after hours. The company did come out and say that it was going to cut about 5% of its global workforce, and it sees fiscal year revenue $51.5 billion to $52.5 billion. Earlier, it saw revenue coming in at $53.8 to $55 billion. The estimate was for $54.33 billion.
Forgive me, stock down almost 6% here in the aftermarket. So let's get to it, what you need to know. We talked about the cut in the global workforce. Joining us is Woo Jin Ho. He's Senior Technology Analyst over at Bloomberg Intelligence. Woo Jin, good to have you here with us. So it is down 6%. Cutting 5% of their global workforce. We were kind of anticipating, I feel like, though, right, in terms of their reducing their cost actions. But how are you seeing some of the headlines that have just come across the Bloomberg?
Well, I mean, if I'm looking at the headlines right now, I mean, we were anticipating revenue cuts heading into results, principally because of the backlog issue. One of the preview notes that I've written on Cisco before is the big backlog hangover. We just didn't know how bad the hangover is, and this is what we get. I think one of the reasons why the stock is down is investors may think that the headcount counts may not be enough. So that's one of those. That's one of the things that.
But would help us out here, because I feel like as a lot of tech companies have cut back on their headcount, sometimes investors think smart. They're realizing they're shifting their, they're adjusting to the time. Never good for if you're one of the workers that are getting cut. But having said that, help me understand then the trade.
Yeah, so from a trade perspective, right? If we think about it from Cisco's perspective, as well as networking as a whole, they kind of lagged on the down cycle, and we're starting to hit the down cycle right now. And the hope and prayer for the networking guys was that, look, this is going to be a very short term and a very shallow down cycle, and we're going to have a very strong recovery. And they've been hanging on to their employees a little bit longer than people had hoped. Now, if we think about the headcount cuts from traditional hardware guys over the past 6 to 9 months, it's been more along the lines of anywhere between 8 to 10%. And with Cisco just doing roughly 5%, and keep in mind they're going to be absorbing the Splunk acquisition when the deal closes later this year. There's another 8,000 people that they need to absorb into the P&L. So that's why I'm thinking that the headcount cuts may not be enough to satisfy investors.
But do you think the headcount cuts may not be enough to satisfy Cisco's goals, and we could actually see more headcount reduction on the horizon?
Well, typically the way Cisco operates is that they make 5% headcount reductions at year end, and that's what I call rearranging the deck chair, where they take some of the underperforming employees, take them out, and then rearrange them to more high performance positions. Now they're doing this a quarter early. This doesn't rule out another round of cuts next quarter.
But again, I go to the point of, I always think of like Mary Barra, right? Had to make some really hard decisions about kind of readjusting because her business was changing, right? And GM had too many different models, too many different brands, EVs were coming. She made these, it was painful, never good again when somebody's losing their job, certainly if you're the person who's being let go. But having said that, is Cisco making these cuts that will get it to a leaner, meaner machine with it and having the people in the right place for the future growth of the company, or we don't know yet?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
So I think I ran the numbers very, very quickly for the outlook, right? With the new adjusted sales guidance, it looks like their OPEX to sales is roughly 32.5. They typically run at 31.5% on an OPEX to sales. So they're still 100 basis points too high on their historical level, right? So that's why I think there still need to be more. That's one. And number two, Carol, I believe you had mentioned that these guys are trying to move more towards to a recurring software model, and that is true. They may need to start hiring people that can start selling software than hardware and perform to those kind of new metrics.
Okay, well, this is not just about the bottom line. It's also about the fiscal year revenue forecast, Woojin. So that missed estimates. And I'm wondering if this is, how much of this story is Cisco specific versus being something that can tell us about the wider industry here?
Well, as I said earlier, networking was slow to see the down cycle. We saw the down cycle with a couple of the peers in Juniper Networks, as well as Extreme Networks. Extreme Networks, and pardon the pun, they actually had an extreme outlook cut by cutting their estimates sales outlook by 23%, right? Cisco, it's not to that degree, but what I'm seeing in their networking business for the next couple of quarters, we're talking about low teens year-over-year declines in their networking sales. So we're talking about a real pullback in demand. Now, the one thing that I'll say, one of the reasons why Cisco had a low outlook for 2024 is because people were having a tough time implementing all of the sudden acceptance of networking equipment over the last couple of quarters. Chuck did not blame the macro. If this is a macro issue, this could be a deeper issue than Cisco may think.
Hey, Woojin, I'm reading through our write-through on the Bloomberg. The company has said that it's been hit by a temporary pause in orders from customers who are busy installing equipment they've already acquired. The forecast adds to concern that businesses are reining in tech spending. So do you buy that, the pause a little bit? But again, to Tim's really smart question, is there something bigger in terms of the macro going on here?
Yep, I do buy the pause, right? Just think about all the hand sanitizer that we got post-COVID. Think about all the networking gear that's sitting in the back office right now that they've been trying to implement. Also, you have to think about the distributors that are selling Cisco gear, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to do their destocking as well. So there's a chain of events that's happening in terms of the Cisco sales model that needs to clear through before we can start getting the sell-in back into the model.
Yeah,
I
was just going to ask, does networking, okay, you got hand sanitizer sitting in the closet. That's one thing, okay? I don't think that stuff expires. But does networking equipment, after 2 years of sitting there, does it become obsolete?
No. Well, I mean, if you think about the stuff that's being used right now, it's not 2 years of sitting there. We're talking about networking equipment that were ordered 2 years ago, all of a sudden coming in the past couple of quarters that they need to implement, right? So it's not just sitting there. They got 2 years of equipment over the last 2 quarters, and they're having a tough time working through and implementing it through. But the distributors are having a tough time. It's like, look, I ordered 2 years of equipment. All my 2 years of equipment is coming in as well, and my guys are having trouble implementing it as well. And I'm stuck with a stockpile of equipment that might take about another couple of quarters to clear out.
Woojin, just one last question here. These are companies that have been around for a lot of years. You do wonder, are they still relevant? On that, we did a story with our Ian King earlier this month about NVIDIA and Cisco teaming up to help companies build in-house AI computing. So I'm like, they're trying to make these pivots. Are they on, and they also acquired Splunk, $28 billion. That was announced in September. Are they taking the steps from your, analysis that get them to a company that becomes more relevant in today's world?
Yep. So in my many years of covering Cisco, they've made multiple acquisitions to be relevant in the next generation data center. So Ian is right. They're making these moves with the NVIDIA, but at the same time, they make their own AI chips to compete with someone against like Broadcom. What they will mention on the call today is about the order activity with their cloud customers on their AI, with AI products. I suspect that it's grown from $1 billion in orders for fiscal 2025 to about 1.5, right?
Okay.
it's not going to really move the needle on a $52 billion company,
exactly.
but they are relevant.
All right.
They're going to be a tech bellwether to stay.
All right, good to know. Right now, though, investors not staying with them, sending the stock down about 4.7% in the aftermarket. Woo Jin Ho, you rock, senior tech analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence out there in Princeton, New Jersey.
Connection lost.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet, 4:21. The time now on Wall Street. We are keeping an eye on Cisco Systems, the largest maker of computer networking equipment. Cisco shares after hours, they are down now by 3.5%. Cisco said it plans to cut thousands of jobs after a slowdown in corporate technology spending wiped out its sales growth. Bloomberg Intelligence senior tech analyst Woo Jin Ho was a guest moments ago here on Bloomberg Business Week, and he talked about the scope of those job cuts.
Keep in mind, they're going to be absorbing the Splunk acquisition when the deal closes later this year. There's another 8,000 people that they need to absorb into the P&L. So that's why I'm thinking that the headcount cuts may not be enough to satisfy investors.
And again, after hours, we got Cisco down now by roughly 3.5%. Turned out to be an up day on Wall Street with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. Not enough to make up for yesterday's days selling, but today the S&P closed just above the 5,000 level, 5,000 and a decimal, up 47 points, up today by 1%. Dow Industrials up 151, up 0.4%. Nasdaq Composite Index up 203, up 1.3%. 10-year 4.26%, the 2-year 4.57%. Gold down $2.50 the ounce, still below $2,000 at $19.90, down 0.1%. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.6%, $76.59 a barrel. So again, recapping, Cisco lower after hours, down now by 3.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week. We do want to update you certainly on a continuing story that we are monitoring, and that has to do with some shooting that happened at the Super Bowl parade. Multiple people were struck by gunshots at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade earlier today. This is coming from the Kansas City Police Department. 2 armed people are in custody, according to the police. Fire department, the battalion there, the battalion chief, Michael Hopkins, saying 8 to 10 people were injured but declined further comment, saying, Tim, only that additional information will be released soon, according to the Associated Press.
The shooting happening near Union Station. It's an entertainment center in Missouri City. The police are still trying to determine the number of victims. Police responded after shots were fired near the Kansas City Chiefs.
We want to be careful here, but Bloomberg did cross a headline that they are sourcing to ABC, saying 1 person is dead after that shooting in Kansas City. But again, trying to give attribution where it is noted, so that obviously headlines are coming from various sources. So we'll continue to update you on that story and give you any new news as it is known.
Hey, check out the new Bloomberg Business app. It features Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You can listen to Bloomberg Business Week and all of our Bloomberg radio programs at any time. Just download the Bloomberg Business app on your smartphone, connect your phone to your car. It's free, it's easy, and it's in the Apple App Store or on Google Play.
All right, something that we talk about a lot is what's going on in the private markets, whether it's private credit or in particular private equity. On private equity alone, funds last year returned the lowest amount of cash to their investors since the financial crisis some 15 years ago. This is according to Raymond James Financial, and that's been hampering buyout firms in their efforts, Tim, to launch new investment vehicles.
Okay, so that's one way we talk about private equity when it comes to our program. But let's switch it up and lift up the veil on what it's like, at least for one person, to work in what many people would consider a rarefied world of finance. We're talking private equity and hedge funds. Carrie Sun is the author of a new book. It's called Private Equity, a Memoir. She joins us from Jersey City this afternoon. Carrie, good to have you with us. Congratulations on the new book. I want to start with your story. That's what this book is. You've got a great story. Tell us how you found yourself working for a billionaire hedge fund manager.
Thank you so much, Carol and Tim, for having me today. I am a writer now, as you say, author with my first book. But before that, I worked in finance. And in college, I majored in math and finance, and I minored in economics. After that, I worked as a quantitative equity analyst. I did that for several years, started business school at Wharton, dropped out, wanting to change career paths, spent a few years kind of taking classes in the humanities, like philosophy, English literature, just giving myself the time and space to kind of discover how I might want to change my path or pivot. And then during those years, I was contacted by a recruiter through LinkedIn who kind of pitched me on this opportunity that he described as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work as the right-hand person to a hedge fund billionaire. I think the firm would describe themselves more as an investment firm, but certainly the hedge fund side was a big part of their business. So I kind of jumped at the opportunity because I didn't come from money. I needed a day job, and so I really thought that this was the opportunity for me. I could have use my background working in finance while at the same time maybe having some free time after work to start my other creative endeavors.
Carrie, many would say that in the financial world that getting to be kind of the right hand assistant to a billionaire founder of an investment firm, hedge fund, or however you want to describe it, is like a great way to really learn the business. Your experience, though, doesn't sound like you liked it at all.
You know, I have to say it was a wonderful learning experience. I I came from a quantitative equity side, so what they were doing was far more fundamentally driven investing, and it was just night and day, whereas when I was in quant equities, my phone often just did not ring. I was just sitting in front of a computer coding, analyzing data sets, building stock selection models. At this other job, being the right hand to a billionaire in the private equity and also hedge fund space, I was on the phone with often 2 or 3 people at the same time, having them on hold and trying to just deliver information, trying to triage emergencies and situations. And it was just a very, very different and extremely busy time.
In the memoir, the names have been changed, not just the names of individuals, but also the name of the firm that you worked for. Talk to us about this decision here and why you ended up changing the names.
Yes, I chose to anonymize nearly every character in the book, as well as the firm, because I really wanted to focus the story on my story. And I didn't want a memoir about me to end up being a memoir about someone else, maybe my boss or the firm that I was at. And I really wanted to center it on my personal story, one woman's experience working in this world. And I think there are wonderful, wonderful memoirs and many books written from the perspective of bosses and owners of these firms, but I really wanted to write a book from the perspective of an average worker.
Have you heard from the folks who
know you?
Yeah, who know you, who maybe see themselves in parts of the book? What have you heard?
I have heard nothing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why did you do this? I don't understand, because it doesn't sound like you're looking to be like, God, this was terrible. I learned some things about myself, and maybe you learned that this wasn't for you. So I'm trying to understand why. Why do it?
Well, as a writer, I'm very interested in particular in topics that I actually just don't know the answer to. And so the time that I describe in my book, which is about 2.5 years, they were the most intense years of my life. And to be honest, even right after and years after, I couldn't really describe what had happened to me. I knew I was burnt out, but I really just didn't actually know what had happened. And then, during my MFA, I went to the New School for my MFA, and I was taking a look at my peers. They were all working multiple jobs just to be able to survive in New York, to fund their creative endeavors, and in this case, an MFA. And I really thought that, that's something I had tried to do. I had burnt out trying to do that. And I really think I have something to say about the way we work now and the way we live, and how the work-life balance and how difficult it is to actually achieve that balance.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because that is something that we talk about a lot here on Bloomberg Business Week. You've worked in some of the most high-pressure situations, and it's interesting that you say you ended up leaving business school to switch careers. A lot of people do go to business school, in fact, to switch careers, and then you ended up actually after business school sort of staying on the financial side of things, and which is a really, really interesting journey, especially until now becoming a writer. So tell us about work-life balance and what you learned and how you came out on the other side.
About work-life balance, I really think that, it was pretty clear from me very early on that this was going to be an extremely intense job. However, I still told myself, I'm all in, I'm down for whatever cause this is, and I'm going to make it work. I blamed myself a lot for not being able to actually do my day job and have time outside, or just even time to recover and be able to, be fresh Monday morning. And so in order to get this job, I went through 14 interviews, something like 10 reference checks. And then I also, didn't get a job description. On my first day of work, I received my job description from my boss, and it listed nearly 100 bullet points of responsibilities, And so I just, in terms of work-life balance, I would like, hopefully anyone who is reading or listening to just think about, their job description and whether their job description. So my job description actually had a line item that more than one line item that was some version of going above and beyond, and so if that
good luck with that.
And so if that is in the job description itself, and there are like 10 times, it's a recipe for.
We'll have to talk to LinkedIn about that. I hear what you're saying. Interesting perspective. Carrie Sun, good luck with the book. Author, Private Equity, a memoir, joining us from Jersey City, New Jersey.
Hey, let's get a check on the latest world and national news and the latest in Kansas City with Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Tim. What started as a victory celebration has turned into a crime scene. Multiple people have been shot in Kansas City, with a fire official saying one person is dead, 9 others injured, following a shooting just after the Kansas City Chiefs' Super Bowl victory parade had ended at Union Station. This woman was in the crowd.
We heard gunshots, but we thought they were fireworks, so half of us didn't really respond to it. But after, we did realize that a shooting took place, which was quite shocking.
Police say 2 people have been taken into custody. Both were armed. Missouri Congressman Mark Alford was being interviewed by CNN when he learned of the shooting. This was before we learned of the one death.
This is not good news for Kansas City. Hopefully there is no one who has died because of this shooting, but I know it's very disheartening. We should be able to come together in situations like this and celebrate victories, not have to deal with a shooting.
Congressman Alford tells CNN the city had spent more than $1 million this year to secure the 2-mile parade route. Officials will be holding a news conference within minutes. The head of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Mike Turner, says he has information about a serious national security threat, and he's urging the administration to declassify the information so the U.S. and its allies can openly discuss how to respond. Virginia Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger is on the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and warns of threats.
Economically and militarily, China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and that is why we must pass this national security supplemental. And particularly at a time when we do see a statement coming out from the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, noting that there are specific threats at this time, that there have been specific briefings about.
Spanberger spoke on Bloomberg's Balance of Power. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 440 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. Cisco System shares, they are lower after hours. Right now, we have got Cisco down by 5.1%. Moments ago, we had Cisco, which is the largest maker of computer networking equipment, announcing plans to cut thousands of jobs after a slowdown in corporate tech spending wiped out its sales growth. Again, after hours, Cisco right now lower by 5.1%. Turned out to be an up day on Wall Street. The S&P 500 index back above 5,000, barely with a decimal. A renewed wave of dip buying sent stocks and bonds higher, following a slide that was triggered by an unexpected pickup in U.S. inflation. S&P 500 index ended the Wednesday session up 47 points with a gain of 1%. The Dow today up 151, up 0.4%. The Nasdaq Composite Index up 203, up by 1.3%. 10-year 4.26%. The 2-year 4.57%. Gold down $1.72 the ounce, little change, down less than 0.1%. 19.91 the ounce. Bitcoin today surged 4.2%, 51,649 today on Bitcoin. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.7%, 76.56 a barrel. Aaron Kennan is the CEO of Clear Harbor Asset Management, and right here on Bloomberg Business Week, he told us he does see opportunities if the market broadens.
The vast majority of stocks, really over the last 2 years, if you look back to December of 2021 to today, you have the S&P up about 7% over that long 2+ year period. You have the Russell 2000 down about 10%. You have the emerging markets index down 13%, and you have 84% of the S&P 500 constituents that are actually not back towards the 2021 peaks.
And you can hear more of the conversation on the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Cisco again cutting thousands of jobs. The stock after hours down now by 5.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hey, thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Really appreciate it. So you'll remember last week we learned that Dartmouth would follow MIT and make a return to standardized testing. The big question we had was what other colleges and universities would follow and when? Well, we are starting to get some of those answers. Bloomberg News higher education and finance reporter Janet Lauren is here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, and she has been digging into this story over the past few weeks and also, I should say, over the past few years as the big shift has happened. And drum roll, please, you reached out to a few universities. You heard back from some of them. What's the latest?
Well, I think we're getting a hint at one school. There's a podcast that the Dean of Admissions at Dartmouth, his name is Lee Coffin, he runs one called Admissions Beat. And if you listen to that episode, you might get a little bit of a hint from him and Jeremiah Quinlan, the Dean of Admissions at Yale, and they talked about how much they get, they have value to them. It's a good predictor. And this podcast came out a few months ago, and Lee Coffin was talking, they were all agreeing that there's very good information. And then we know what happened last week. Dartmouth said they're going back. And Jeremiah Quinlan said that Yale is closely considering this policy, and he expects to make an announcement in the coming weeks.
If they make the announcement in the coming weeks, that would affect not the class that applied in the fall, I'm guessing.
It could be the current junior class.
Current
but we'll
junior
see.
class, okay.
They could do whatever they want.
Remind me, because it's been many years since I applied to college, when these things are due, typically, right?
So
I think you did it in the fall.
So if you're applying early decision, you need to have your testing done, pretty soon. The deadline is November 1st.
Okay.
So, but if you're applying regular decision, it's typically January 1st.
Okay, so yeah, the ship has sailed for
the current seniors. Many
yeah.
of them know, or they're finding out now. I think I saw a tweet that Michigan was announcing their admissions about this time.
Okay, so let's take a big step back here and talk about the changes that happened during COVID, because the context here is that a lot of top schools ended up getting rid of the requirement for standardized testing in the last few years.
Correct. And actually there was one school that was a bit of an outlier even before the pandemic, the University of Chicago. They said no more test requirement. But again, just because it's optional doesn't mean that kids are not submitting their scores.
Jen and Lauren, I have to interrupt you. We're going to head to Kansas City, Missouri right now, where we're hearing a press conference on the shooting that happened a little earlier today at the parade.
We note at the outset. First today, we had 600 Kansas City, Missouri Police Department officers, 250 from outside agencies. We went out today, like everyone in Kansas City, looking to have a celebration. That celebration was marred by a shooting today. And we recognize that there are some who are injured. We are praying for the safety of everyone. I've talked to a few different folks so far. One, we have spoken to the Kansas City Chiefs, who made clear that their prayers are with everyone who was at the parade today, everyone in Kansas City, and everyone who was touched by this incident. They also noted that their players, coaches, and staff are all accounted for at this point and safe. We, however, note that this is a fluid situation, so all that we are sharing now may change as the hours go ahead. We've also received a call from the White House that offered all federal assistance in the investigation. We had federal agencies present today. We appreciate that, and certainly in the days ahead and the hours ahead, we will make sure we continue to do this work. I will say personally, first, a thank you to the women and men of law enforcement, to the women and men who work with the Kansas City Fire Department and our other agencies. When the shooting started, I, like many others, ran for safety. I saw a number of agencies, including the Kansas City Police Department, officers with guns drawn who were running towards danger. We thank them for that. As I was leaving the scene, I saw members of our Kansas City Fire Department administering aid to folks who are seriously injured without concern for the shootings and the challenges that were near them. This is absolutely a tragedy, the likes of which we would have never expected in Kansas City, and the likes of which we will remember for some time. However, I want to say thank you to those who are making sure that we are safe today, those who are investigating this incident, and those who will continue to make sure that those who committed these acts today are brought to justice. We'll come back for some questions at the end of the Chief's comments, but now the Police Chief, Stacey Graves.
Chief Stacey Graves, Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. At the conclusion of the Chiefs rally today, there were shots fired on the west side of Union Station. Immediately, officers responded to the area, took 2 people into custody, and also immediately rendered life-sustaining aid to those victims. We're still gathering information on the number and the status of victims. But like I said, we know that one of the victims is deceased. We also know that officers ran towards danger. Officers were there to keep everyone safe. I'm angry at what happened today. The people who came to this celebration should expect a safe environment. We had over 800 law enforcement officers, Kansas City and other agencies, at the location to keep everyone safe. Because of bad actors, which were very few, this tragedy occurred, even in the presence of uniformed law enforcement officers, who again ran towards them and took them into custody. To the people who were injured in this tragedy, our hearts go out to you and your families. This investigation is just beginning, and we are working safely to clear all surrounding areas and businesses. This is still an active investigation. We will continue to keep you updated. We will keep you updated on Twitter and most likely a follow-up press availability. Did you have anything?
Are you saying one of the shooters is dead?
No. One of our victims has been declared deceased. We have. Right now, we have up to 10 to 15 injured. Yes. Right now, we do not have an exact number of people who were victims of a gunshot wound. It could be upwards from 10 to 15 with one deceased.
Do you know how many are in critical condition at this point?
I do not have conditions on our victims just yet.
Any believed to be children?
I do not believe that any of them were children.
Any law enforcement injured in this? First responders?
Nothing of note.
Chief, what prompted? What do you guys believe now prompted the shooting?
That is still under investigation. I myself was outside when I heard the shots fired. It is an ongoing investigation. It's going to take us a little bit to determine exactly what led up to the shooting. I will say, though, we do have 2 suspects in custody.
I have a question for you. Circulating on social media that some fans may have helped contain one of those.
I have heard that as well. I have heard that fans got involved in the apprehension or the pursuit of one of the suspects. I cannot confirm that right now, but that is something that I have heard myself. Yes.
You're listening right now to a press conference from Kansas City, Missouri. The person speaking right now is Kansas City Police Chief Stacey Graves, who said that 10 to 15 people were injured. One person has died. 2 suspects are in custody. We'll send you now back to the press conference.
As soon as the rally concluded, there were shots fired on the west side of Union Station. Officers were on scene in the area. I know one of the suspects was immediately pursued on foot. Like I said, there's 2 suspects in custody. I have heard the information that was just requested. I will confirm or deny that. But after that, immediately officers began rendering life-sustaining aid, calling in fire, which is the fire department, to also assist victims.
Do you know if there were more than 2 people taken into custody? Because we had 2 people, after you guys had made your announcement, there were 2 people in custody, 2 people live on our air being taken, handcuffed, put into vans. So can you tell us about that and the process as this investigation continues?
I don't know exactly the 2 that you're talking about that your camera caught on video being loaded into a wagon. I don't know that, but I can tell you that in and around that scene, it is still active. Not active in necessarily threats, but it's a very active scene. We're still investigating. This is still early on. We still have parties that are walking into hospitals.
Chief Graves, do you know anything about the suspects in terms of where they're from? Are they from Kansas City?
I do not know that, but that's something that I also will be finding out.
2 questions. We were hearing upwards of maybe 20 shots. Can you talk about the number that you heard while you were
I'm hearing 10 to 15, possibly 15, with the one that is deceased.
And do you know anything about the timing? It seems odd that it's waited to the very end of the rally.
I don't have anything about, I can't give you an answer on the timing. I can just say that that's when it occurred, and we are investigating what led up to that. Maybe once we get some of those details, we'll know why that happened at that time, but right now it's still too new.
Chief, was it just one incident or multiple incidents that injured multiple?
That is something that is under investigation.
Mayor Quinton Lucas, you talked about how you were on the ground and you yourself had to run for safety. And I understand we're still waiting on a timeline and trying to understand what exactly happened. But we were having a Super Bowl parade, and this is what the country is talking about now. What is your message to this city at a time like this?
I second the comments by the chief of police. I'm heartbroken. First of all, I'm praying for the victims and the families impacted. I start with them. I'm incredibly upset, disappointed. I was there with my wife. I was there with my mother. We never would have thought that we, along with Chiefs players, along with fans, hundreds of thousands of people, would be forced to run for our safety today. I think that I'll let the investigation shake out before coming to any further conclusions, but I think the initial response absolutely is anger. You know, we have done a number of these now, and this is a day that a lot of people look forward to, something they remember for a lifetime. And what they shouldn't have to remember is the threat of gun violence, marring a day like this, injuring them and their families. This morning, I was actually thinking about bringing my child, as many people in Kansas City did. And I don't want us to have to, in our country, for every big event, think about a concern of being shot. As the chief noted, we had a lot of law enforcement officers there today. They did exceptional and outstanding work, and I will second that again. Because on your timeline point, I was inside of Union Station. We heard something. A number of us start running, and I see a stream of officers going the exact other direction. In, with guns drawn, ready to address danger. And that was the situation throughout. People who responded absolutely immediately. But I wish that we lived in a world where they wouldn't have to do that. I wish we live in a world where we wouldn't have to see incidents like that. But I'm as heartbroken as anybody. We will do a full and thorough investigation. I hope that we bring whoever this is to justice. And we will continue to try to make sure that we can be as safe as possible. However, when you have people who decide to bring guns to events, when you have people who are deciding to try to mar events, celebratory ones like this one, all of us start to become members of this club that none of us want to be a part of, which is those who have experienced mass shootings. I hope for Kansas City this is one of the last times we experience that.
Were the players in any danger at any point?
What's that? Sorry, I'm going.
In danger at any point?
Was I in danger?
No, any of the players, the Chiefs players.
You know what? I think we'll let the investigation take a look at that. The police department responded effectively, I think incredibly quickly, to make sure that people would be out of harm's way. That being said, a number of us had to flee from a situation because we heard a sound of gunshots. So I'll let you answer your own question in terms of whether you think that's something that puts you in danger or not. In my view, anytime shots are nearby, you don't know where they're coming from, you don't know who's firing them and all of that, then perhaps there is a situation of danger. But
This is a question for fire.
That is Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas from a press conference in Kansas City. You heard earlier from Kansas City Police Chief Stacey Graves, who said that 10 to 15 people were injured in this shooting at the Chiefs celebratory parade today. One person has died from injuries. Two suspects are in custody. Shots were fired at the west side of Union Station. I want to get an update on world and national news and also the latest in Kansas City. For that, we go to Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Nancy.
Thanks, Tim. Well, you have been hearing from Kansas City officials following that chaotic scene this afternoon following the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade. Kansas City Police Chief Stacey Graves says one person is dead, 10 to 15 people are injured. They're not certain about that. And this followed a shooting once the parade had ended at Union Station. Police say two armed individuals were taken into custody. Police Chief Graves says the situation is still under investigation. This woman, Amanda Wink, was at the parade with her daughter when the shooting started.
About the time we were running in that opposite direction, then everybody started running again and made us get down to the ground. We didn't know what was going on, really. Very nerve-wracking.
Tens of thousands had lined the parade route for the celebration. Police Chief Graves says no Kansas City Chiefs personnel or players were injured. Again, she did say one person is dead, 10 to 15 people injured after that shooting this afternoon. That's now back to you, Carol and Tim.
Thank you so much for that update, Nancy Lyons. Really do appreciate it. And now over to some business news because there's quite a bit of action in the after hours. Let's get an update on how the trading day that was. Here's Charlie Pellet.
Thank you very much. We got the S&P back above 5,000. Tim, big news after the bell. Cisco Systems shares selling off. We'll see how this all plays out, not only in Asia tonight, but also, of course, in U.S. trading tomorrow. Cisco, the largest maker of computer networking equipment, has announced plans to cut thousands of jobs after a slowdown in corporate tech spending wiped out its sales growth. Now, after hours, stock is lower by 5.2%. A restructuring plan will affect roughly 5% of Cisco's workforce. An update for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. S&P up 47, higher by 1%, as I mentioned, closing back above 5,000. The Dow up 151, up 0.4%. 10-year yield today, 4.25%. The 2-year, 4.57%. Do not want to neglect NASDAQ. It was up today by 1.3%. Gold lower by $1.1992 the ounce, drop there of 0.1%, while West Texas Intermediate crude was down 1.7%, $76.56 a barrel. Again, Cisco after hours, after earnings, down now by 5.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hey, thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. We're continuing to follow the latest out of Kansas City, where multiple people were struck by gunshots at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade. The Kansas City Police Department said earlier today, two armed people are in custody, the police said. The shooting happened near Union Station in the city. We did just now hear from Kansas City Police Chief Stacey Graves, who told reporters in a press conference that 10 to 15 people have been injured. They don't know the full number at this point, and she even said that people are still walking into the hospital. One person is confirmed dead. She also did say that two people were in custody. We're going to have more coverage of this throughout the evening here on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV as well. But to bring people up to speed, we're going to have 10 to 15 people have